The story of Jesus going to the wedding is in John's Gospel. And John's Gospel is all about the glory of God that becomes flesh. The life of God that comes among us. And so John is not really telling a story, though it appears he is, about changing water to wine. That's merely an occasion. Jesus comes not to fill earthen vessels with water and create wine. He doesn't say to his church and his disciples, "Go and make wine." It'd be very popular. He comes to fill human vessels with glory. He comes to fill human beings with life. And I say that because at the very end of that little story, John tells us Jesus did this first sign at Cana of Galilee, and he revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him. And so the good news is not making water into wine. The good news is that glory comes into this world, and it comes to become flesh. And his disciples, it says, believed in him. And that's what I want us to think about today. Because believing in is the way in which we are engaged with glory, welcoming it. Believing is not some kind of mechanical transaction. Sort of like God gets a hold of you at your baptism and slings you through the water and says, "Activated. Good to go. Done." Instead, it's a process. Believing in. We see it with the disciples. Learning to listen, to trust, to respond to Jesus. It's an ongoing relationship with someone. And as that goes along, they learn what it means. So I want to say some things about that, about believing. When Jesus comes to give glory into human lives, when glory comes into a human life, when we are encountered with glory, it can be painful. And I'll tell you a story. When my daughter was about 5 years old, she had a splinter in her finger, and she came to me and wanted me to help her. It bothered her. And so she saw me get a needle. She had no problem with that. And I got some alcohol, and I cleaned the wound and sterilized the needle. She put her hand right in my hand. And then I took the needle and began to move the splinter out. And what amazes me is she didn't take her hand away. She let me. She believed in me. She trusted me. She trusted that I would do what needed to be done. That's believing in. And when we allow the grace of God that's offered and freely poured out, when it encounters us, there are things about us that it will touch. There's things that need to be challenged. There's things that need to be healed. And sometimes it's painful. And we're invited to leave our hand there. Let the glory work. Let the grace work. Now, another thing about believing in, when God's Spirit comes, when the glory of God is indeed activating in a human life, beginning to work, there are signs that you can see something happening in a life. And we hear St. Paul today trying to teach a group of Christians about how this works, the church in Corinth. And human beings, being what we are, we tend to muddle things up and take things the wrong way. And so as these Christians are beginning to experience, they're leaving their hand there. They're letting God work in their life, and it's beginning to bear fruit. And some good things are happening. And they're beginning to kind of catalog it. Well, they have that gift, and they have that gift, and that gift's better than that gift. And I really want that gift. And look at me, I've got this gift. And Paul's, no. So the purpose of what I'm going to call glorification, the work of glory in the human heart, isn't to puff anybody up, isn't to create comparisons, isn't to create categories of more impressive, less impressive. Each is given a manifestation of the glory of the Spirit for the common good. God doesn't want to lift you up. God wants to lift everyone up. And He wants to do it through one another, caring for one another, and allowing what God gives to go through you as a blessing to others. Our eyes need to be off us and off others in terms of comparisons, and our eyes need to be on how can I serve? How can I be a vessel of caring? And then another thought about believing in. As we continue to listen and engage and allow our hand to stay in God's hand, as it were, and allow the Spirit to work, and it isn't always painful, don't get me wrong. It's also sometimes wonderful and joyful. And as that is happening, it nonetheless is an interesting ride. It's an interesting journey. So another story about my daughter. Very glad she's not here today. When she was, again, maybe 5 or so, 6, I forget the age, it was time for her to ride her bike. She wanted to learn how to ride her two-wheeler all by herself. And so we did the thing that's been done a billion times. I'm out there with her, holding the seat and the handlebar, and I'm running along with her. And thankfully, I was very, very much younger at that time. And as we go along, she's got it. She's pedaling away. I can feel she's got the balance. I just release my hands, and I'm running alongside. And then she looks and she notices that I'm not holding on to her bike. And she comes to a stop, and she gives me a piece of her mind. She was livid. I let her go. I had to. God will let you go. God's ways are not our ways. And often we're just not even going to understand what's happening or why it's happening. But believing it is trusting. And if He lets us go, He had to. We will fall. We will get hurt. We will struggle. That's all part of the journey. And the believing in it is to trust that we may be really, really mad, but God's there. So, dear brothers and sisters, we need to work this out. We need to stay with it, stay with believing in. And we need encouragement to do that. And we really can't talk about the individual challenges and instances and pains and joys of our personal lives here on Sunday morning with 50 or 60 people. So we need to encourage each other in small groups, to be able to talk to 2 or 3 other people, not about the weather and all the football playoffs, but about what's happening in your life and your heart as you keep your hand with God, and as things happen and as you work them out, whether it's painful or joyful, and as you keep responding and learning and growing. We need that encouragement from one another. And above all, we need to understand the good news. The glory of God becomes flesh. And the glory of God, the life of God, is given. It's poured out into human vessels. And John notes that not everybody is interested and not everyone receives it. But to those who believe in him and receive this glory, who stay with it, he gives power to become children of God.